Welcome back. In this short lecture, I hope you understand what we mean by high-speed PCB design and how it differs from the low-speed designs that you may already be familiar with, such as when you're working with Arduino's ESP32 boards or with Raspberry Pi hats. If you built any of those, you already know the basics of schematic capture, layout, and manufacturing. High-speed design builds on those same foundations, but it also introduces a new dimension: the physics of fast electrical signals. When you design a simple board for a microcontroller, you think of traces as wires. They connect pins, carry logic signals, and if the schematic is correct, the board usually just works. But when you move into high-speed digital design, copper traces stop behaving like simple wires. They act as transmission lines, like antennas, that guide electromagnetic waves. At low speeds, voltage appears everywhere on a trace almost instantly. But at high speeds, voltage travels, and reflections or geometry changes can corrupt the signal. And that's the main difference. In high-speed design, the physical layout is part of the circuit. This happens when the trace length becomes a significant fraction of the signal's rise time. The rule of thumb is that if a signal's one-way propagation delay exceeds about 1/6 of its rise time, treat the trace as a transmission line or as an antenna. Now let's look at some real examples here. Let's consider Arduino GPIOs, which are considered low speed. For such signals, the rise time is about 10 nanoseconds. When we use FR4 as substrate material, the propagation time is about 15 centimeters per nanosecond. So if we use the 1/6 rule, we multiply 1/6 by 10 nanoseconds and we get 1.67 nanoseconds. In 1.67 nanoseconds, the signal can travel around 25 centimeters. We use that as the threshold. A typical trace in an Arduino design when it comes to GPIOs is 5 centimeters, which is much smaller than the 25 centimeter threshold, so there's no issue here. It can route freely and reflections don't matter. If we apply the same calculations, for example, on the USB 2.0 interface, which is borderline between high speed and low speed, with a rise time of 0.3 nanosecond. And when we apply the 1/6 rule of thumb, we get a threshold of 0.75 centimeters. So here we need to make sure that our traces are below 0.75 centimeters. And even short traces can behave like transmission lines. And that's why USB 2.0 requires a 90 ohm differential impedance and careful routing, which is what we are going to be doing in this course. If we switch to USB 3.0 or HDMI, both of which are high-speed interfaces with rise time of around 0.05 nanoseconds or 50 picoseconds, then the threshold length is 1.25 millimeters. So here, every millimeter matters. The geometry, the layer stack up, and the via selection become critical. So while an Arduino trace may be too short to matter, a USB 3.0 or HDMI trace must be engineered precisely, even when only a few centimeters long. Imagine your signal as water moving through a pipe. At low speeds, like an Arduino GPIO, the pressure equalizes instantly. Everything sees the change at once, inside the pipe, of course. But at high speeds, like USB 3, the water rushes down the pipe as a wave. Any bend, valve, or change in pipe diameter causes reflections, just like electrical reflections in a transmission line. This analogy helps us visualize why geometry, continuity, and matching matter so much in high-speed design. In this table, I've documented some of the most important differences between low-speed and high-speed design. Take your time looking through this table just to get a basic understanding of these differences. The main thing is that at high speed, layout choices, trace width, spacing, and layer stack determine whether the board works reliably or fails intermittently. And these don't matter in low-speed designs. In low-speed designs, the schematic defines behavior, but in high-speed designs, the layout designs behavior. A good high-speed designer thinks about signal integrity, including things such as reflections and edge distortion, timing, ensuring that differential pairs arrive together, crosstalk, which includes spacing and routing discipline, and of course power integrity, which is about keeping voltage rails clean during switching. At this level, the PCB isn't just a connector, it's a critical electrical component. To manage high-speed signals effectively, you should follow these principles. First, control impedance. Define trace widths, spacing, and dielectric. Second, continuous return paths. Route over solid ground planes. Third, choose short and direct routing. Avoid stubs, veers, and definitely 90-degree corners. Fourth, ensure length matching. Tune differential pairs and time critical nets. Fifth, ensure power integrity. Use solid planes and local decoupling. And finally, sixth, do careful layer planning. Define your stack-up before routing. And we'll apply these concepts and actually expand on them and talk about them in more detail throughout the course using KiCad's modern high-speed tools. These concepts may sound advanced, but they're not magic. They're the same physics you already know, just with shorter timescales. KiCad 9 includes a differential pair tuner and 3D stack-up editors that make this accessible to everyone. And by following proven designs like the LattePanda Mu light carrier, we can learn high-speed techniques safely and effectively. Now, in this lecture, I introduced the core ideas behind high-speed PCB design, when and why they matter. In follow-up lectures, I'll deliver a high-speed design primer, where we'll explore these effects in more depth, how impedance is calculated, how return paths work, and how to use KiCad and external tools to apply these principles in practice. You already have the foundation from your microcontroller projects, and now you learn to think like a high-frequency hardware engineer.